In today's video, we're taking a look at all of the miniature games I've played over my years. Now, I have played more than this. I'm trying to focus on the ones where I've had more games. I've played with the rule sets a little more. So I have tried to cherry pick them, and they've had some impact on me, whether it be the rule set, the miniatures, meeting certain friends, or which has the best community, or which I still play now. If looking at this list, you think there's any I might enjoy, drop them in the comments below. Let me know which miniature games you've been enjoying recently. But let's venture into my journey, starting with where it all began, the Middle-earth strategy battle game. Although I think it was called something different back then. Maybe it was War of the Ring, maybe it was before that. It would have been in 2004, 2005, so I would have been in secondary school at the time. And there was a group of friends I met with every Sunday, and this became what we did on Sundays. We painted these up, we tried to build boards, which was just like a strip of green grass laid down. We put our beaten up monstrosity paint job miniatures down, and we relived the things we saw on the screen. Now, we were all massive Lord of the Rings fans, and it's a game, if you've seen the channel before, that I play to this day. I obviously took a massive break in between. I stopped entirely, came back a few years ago, but I've been enjoying it, and it's taken over. I have 10, 15 different armies sat on a cabinet dedicated to it now. It's really got out of hand, but Lord of the Rings is my favorite world to be in. So yeah, this game is just taken over, and I don't regret a thing. I'm glad I got into it, having those memories with those friends, some of which I still play with now. It's just been incredible. I do genuinely believe, despite it being Lord of the Rings and my bias, it is the best rule set for any miniature game. So not only is the combat handled really well, so one army's going to shoot then the other, but it's not like Warhammer where you're going to wipe your team off the board. Maybe you'll kill one character, if that. If you've got particularly good shooting and they've got low defense, maybe a few more. And then you get into combat and you both roll at the same time. So it's not you killing all of their stuff and they can't retaliate. I do think that is a massive issue with a lot of games where one army does all their stuff, then the other does all theirs. Because you can lose stuff before you even get a chance to act. And that just doesn't happen in Lord of the Rings. There's small things like fight values. So if Aragorn is fighting against, maybe he's surrounded by 6 goblins, so they're going to get 6 dice. Aragorn obviously gets more than 1 because of being Aragorn, so he gets 3. 6 versus 3, there's still a better chance the goblins roll better. The goblins roll a 6. Aragorn manages to match that with a 6, but because Aragorn has a better fight value, he is going to win that fight. So there's small things like this. You have things like Might, where you can modify dice. You have things like Strike, where you can up your fight value. There's so many small intricacies in this game. I absolutely love it. It also includes a lot of stuff where you can have these moments and just do anything you want. So your characters can swim, they can climb, they can try and jump across ledges. All of this is included in the rule sets, and it makes it feel like a very complete game, and you can do what you want to do with your characters. Speaking of characters then, obviously being in Lord of the Rings, we've got a ton of monsters, a ton of creatures. We've got things like the Balrog, we've got Sauron, we've got dragons, we've got Smaug, which is absolutely massive. But then we've got stuff like berserkers, goblins, all of the stuff you would recognize from the films. The other thing I love about this game is any character can have its moment. So you could have a singular orc going to strike against Aragorn, and well, not Aragorn, because obviously we love Aragorn. An orc landing that final blow on Legolas, that perfect bastard. yeah, now we're talking. The orc lands a blow and becomes a hero in his army. Small moments like that, the fact that the rule set helps create those, it is honestly the perfect game in my eyes, and why this channel is mainly focused on that. So a few years passed, we stopped playing. Obviously, we weren't massively into the hobby side of things. Obviously, I do pick it back up later because that's what this channel is about. So we do get there. The next game I got into was a few years later. I was in a comic book store. Randomly, I was just picking up some comics, and there was a group of people playing with the heroes from my comics on a tabletop. They were opening boosters and then just putting them down, playing games. And I was interested, so I jumped in. I haven't looked back. It's still a game I play now. It has so many mixes of characters. You get DC, you get Marvel, you get Scooby-Doo, you get Star Trek, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Gears of War, Street Fighter, Halo. We've had so many IPs within this one game. It's honestly incredible. I will say, depending where you are, will impact this, because this last year in the UK, we've not had a release, which is... it's unacceptable. It really is. We've not had any main sets. We've not had any subsets. It's just, I would say it's going to be only applicable for now, and hopefully only for like the next few months, year. So do look into it wherever you're from. Make sure you can get the product. You can obviously buy it from the website, but it's but a bit more expensive, and it's already quite an expensive game. So just do a bit of research. If you're in the US, you're absolutely fine. It is booming over there. Hopefully at some point this year, we can bring it back to the UK. I can bring it back to this channel, and we can really give it a good push once things are sorted. But I thought I should mention that. A few other things maybe to mention before you get into it. Like I said, it's quite expensive. Obviously buying boosters, you're not guaranteed to get what you want. So the second-hand market is probably where you want to go. But even then, the best figures can run you a couple of $100s, which is a lot. Obviously, you don't need that. It's just you're at a disadvantage. And I think the balance in this game is another thing. There's some things that are just miles better than everything else. And it's normally a group of things that you see all the time in tournaments. So probably worth mentioning if you're going to get into that side of things. If you're just looking for a fun game with all your favorite characters, not having to do the hobby side is another massive thing. You can just buy a booster, open them up and play a game. Like I did in that store so many years ago. Being able to just jump into it is massive. And if you're not into the hobby side, this game is perfect. There's a ton of fun, there's a ton of characters, there's a ton of great game types, there's a ton of customizability. It's just a great game and one that I would recommend with a few drawbacks, but some of those drawbacks hopefully are sorted within the next year. So go out, enjoy the game. I can't recommend it enough. It's one that I still play. A little bit of research if you're looking at this video as it comes out, as it's in some areas very difficult to get hold of. So following that, from this, I traveled around playing Heroclix, and then I met somebody at a different store that showed me a demo game of Star Wars X-Wing. Now this is still some of the most fun I've had on a tabletop, unless you're counting all that lovemaking I did with your mother. Yeah, that's definitely not staying in. Anyway, X-Wing, unique playstyle, very different. You reveal dials that only have so many options on them, so maybe you have to make some really tough decisions. A great rule set, one of my favorites, and I think it is discontinued now, but if it came back, I would 100% jump into it straight away. The miniatures, again, you don't have to paint, you can just put them down and play. Just everything about it I absolutely loved. I always thought I would prefer the boots to the ground version where you can use like the Jedis and stuff. I honestly think I might have preferred X-Wing. You do feel like that pilot. Like I say, you only have so many options, so you're flying around and you want to go here, but you can't make that maneuver. So you have to do this and line it up for the next turn. You have to think ahead. It's very tactical, it's very fun, and it's one that I do wish would come back at some point. It did come back as a 2.0. I don't know if it did that well, although I think I was still in the game when it did that. I think I bought some upgrade stuff. Not sure. Hopefully it comes back. Like I said, one of my favorites. Flying around in a spaceship in the Star Wars world. Speaking of Star Wars then, the next games I got into was A Song of Ice and Fire and Star Wars. The Star Wars was with a local group, so there's a local store, met a load of people. We all got into Star Wars. I bought all the armies. I still do love it. Its rule set is one of the best. Got a ton of tokens and keywords and things to manipulate dice. Increase your dice, more powerful dice as you do more powerful things. I do honestly think it is up there as one of the best rule sets. I think some of the miniatures are incredible. You get the ATSTs, you get the land speeders, you get the Jedis, the Sith. You get a ton of really cool stuff in this game. Wookiees, you get the, I think they added Ewoks as well, which most people don't like, but I love. I was always saying in the game I want to build an army of them, but I got out of it before they were released for a few reasons. Everyone in my area stopped playing. They either moved away, stopped playing, or I just don't really talk too much anymore, which is sad. I didn't really get into the competitive tournament side of it too much, so it's not like I established groups anywhere else or decided to go somewhere else to play it. I think if I had probably got my foot into that before, maybe I would have stuck around because, like I say, I do enjoy the game. I enjoyed painting them. Gorgeous miniatures, great game, great gameplay, really good rules. The other thing was the release Shatterpoint, which should 100% have been using the same miniatures. The fact that they did a Star Wars game under the same umbrella, but weren't the same miniatures, was a massive loss. I'm going to talk about Song of Ice and Fire in a second, and they did the same thing, but used the same miniatures. Because Shatterpoint is a skirmish version, so a much smaller scale, less characters, and it would have been perfect. I honestly would still be in the game, but the fact that they did it differently and they're releasing all of these characters for Shatterpoint, which weren't in Star Wars Legion yet, which had been out so much longer. It was getting slower releases. It just felt like it was dying a death, which it hasn't. It's still around and it's still booming. So if you want to get into it, do. I'm just explaining where I'm coming from with it. I would 100% get back into it if someone was like, hey, let's go do this. Let's go to a Star Wars Legion tournament. I'll be like, yeah, sure. I'll buy an army. Let's go do it. Because it is one of those games that I do want to still be playing. I just couldn't I don't know, it felt weird not playing, but having 4 fully fledged armies, hundreds and hundreds, if not £1,000 of stuff just sat there. So yeah, I did get rid of it. It's one that I do and probably will regret at some point. But let's move on to A Song of Ice and Fire. So got into it around a similar... Actually, A Song of Ice and Fire was a lot before. It was closer to like Star Wars X-Wing, but I never really got into it. And then I got back into it again, like Middle-earth. This one probably 5 years ago. I bought a load of different armies and different troops because there's so many options. And I think once you go down that hole, you're really going to get into this one because there's a ton of cool stuff. We've got the Golden Company now. You can get skinwalkers, skin changers. You can turn into different animals with like the free folk. There's the pyromancers. There's a ton of really cool stuff. You can get like a mountain. Thought I had him out here. He's not. A giant mountain figure on a horse. There's just so many cool things. If you like the shows, you like the books, you're going to love this. They have a tactics boarding game, which is basically like King's Landing, where Littlefinger and Varys and Cersei are all going to have an impact on the board. So maybe they heal your troops, maybe they send some warnings and some of your troops decide to run. Maybe they want to draw some cards and impact via tactics cards. Another thing, very much Game of Thrones, it's very backstabby stuff you reveal that your opponent's not aware of. You can add panic tokens and other things that impact the game. Again, keywords and tokens used to their advantage in this game, very similar to Star Wars Legion. That impact dice rolls and you can re-roll things, and some things focus more on panic. So like the Boltons focus more on fear and making you run away rather than killing stuff. There's a ton of really cool stuff like that. Obviously you got the dragons, and it's just, yeah, each army feels very unique, and they've added quite a few armies at this point. So again, another great game. It's one that I do still hold. So it was either between that and Star Wars Legion. Not really played a ton of Game of Thrones since then, so I don't know if it was the right choice or not. I don't know if we would have played Star Wars. The other thing was I played with like a game group at home, and they weren't really into Star Wars, so it just made the choice a bit simpler. They were into Game of Thrones massively at the time. So yeah, it then moved into, again, another smaller skirmish game, The Walking Dead All Out War. It was very different to anything I played before. It's not like a war game. You don't have an army. You have maybe 2 characters, 3 characters. You go around this universe. Not only are you fighting against your opponent, there's also zombies wandering around. There's booby traps. There's things that can go wrong on top of just having to deal with your opponent. It's fun. It's wild. It's very swingy. So I'd say there's some luck involved. So if you're looking for a competitive game, this maybe isn't it. Obviously, it does have that side to it, but there is a lot of luck and other things involved, more so than other games. But that luck leads to fun and these incredible moments. So if you're looking for a good time, it's definitely the game. The miniatures are cool. Getting to paint zombies is very unique. And if you've not done that, it's definitely worth doing in this one. The rule set's fantastic. There's like a threat meter that increases and makes stuff more difficult. If you fire a gun, it's going to set off mayhem and other things. And walkers are going to run to you and try and take you out before you can do anything else. Each decision you make has a massive impact. And I love that. It fits the world perfectly. And if you're looking for a smaller skirmish game, a quicker game, set in a horror world, then this is definitely the one for you. I followed this up with my second Games Workshop game, and that was Blood Bowl. Now, these miniatures are absolutely gorgeous. They are fun to paint. They are fun to build. They are fun to look at. The game set is some of the most fun I've had with a game. It felt entirely silly. It felt, the moments were incredible. You'd have these massive throws and a catch to the other end to win the game. And these huge moments, maybe someone's knocked into the crowd and beaten to death by the crowd. It just had everything. Everything felt like you could sit down, play a game of this, have a drink, have some food, just have a good time whilst doing it. It felt a lot less serious than some of the others, and it was one of the few sports games that I had a look at. The other one I do want to try and get into, which if you've played, let me know in the comments, is Rumble Slam. I am a massive wrestling fan. You can see some wrestling stuff here, actually. So that's definitely a game I want to try. This is Blood Bowl is the only sports one I've played so far. But the amount of fun I've had with it, it's just made me want more. So at some point, Rumble Slam will be coming to the channel. Followed that up with the other end of things, and that was Bolt Action. Very much obviously being based on history, it feels a lot more serious. I did really enjoy this. I don't have an army for it. I've always borrowed stuff to play it, but I will always play it if given the option. I have bought a Dad's Army actually, so if anyone wants some, come get it. But the fact it's based on World Wars, and the players that play it obviously are very knowledgeable about that. I find it fascinating, so I've loved picking people's brains and just listening to them talk about it. So that is definitely a positive. I do think you need to be into that side of things to potentially get into this one. You could just take it as a war game, forget all the history, and just play it as miniatures. I do think a lot of the community are more history focused and very much like, this should be painted like that, this should be that, and so on. So it really depends what you're looking for. A great rule set again, I think it worked really well. It had some cool moments. Felt very swingy at points, like some stuff again can just be taken off the board in a strike, which I don't know, it just never sits right with me. But in general, I think how stuff impacts certain rolls. There's things like, I think it was the mortar where it gets easier to hit every time as they're sort of triangulating where you are. Things like that felt like the game should, and it it just improved the experience. Like I said, I would play this game if someone put an army in front of me and was like, do you want a game? 100% in. Ton of fun, very interesting community, obviously very knowledgeable, like I say. So if you're into that type of thing, this will definitely be the game for you. Speaking of swingy then, next up I got into Dead Man's Hand. I do actually have a small posse for this, which is played quite a few games of it. It's a lot of fun, but it is very swingy. I've had games where turn one, I've lost 3 characters and you've only really got like 6 maybe. Can't remember how many you actually have. Somewhere around there anyway, you don't have many. So half my team was wiped out instantly. I think it's if you roll a 20, you just remove them from the board. So it doesn't happen often, but it can happen. And having that as a rule set, it just feels... I still had a good time. It was still a laugh. It was hilarious when it happened. But if you're looking for a competitive game, you're looking for something to really get into, there's not much to get into here. It's just creating cool moments, which is my favorite thing personally for tabletop gaming. So I do love this game. It's got a very unique rule set with you use playing cards with special abilities, and they sort of assign an order in which you can activate. Fantastic game if you're looking for a Western, and I think one of the few, so it might be an option if that's the game you're looking for. Next up was Water Tanker, which I don't know if it's meant to be played like this, but obviously in the name it's slightly tongue-in-cheek anyway, so I think it's meant to be a more fun version of War, if you can have that. Basically you get a tank. From the games that I've played of it anyway, we all took tanks and just shot the shit out of each other. And that was pretty much it. I don't really have much else to say on it. Ton of fun. Shooting tanks, driving tanks around, smashing stuff up. Obviously, as you shoot them, things can go wrong. Maybe they can't move anymore, or maybe they can't turn. It was a good time. I enjoyed it. Following on from that is Unmatched, more of a board game. It is, because it's a board game, it's a little more, it's very collectible. Obviously, there's a ton of different expansions, but those expansions feel balanced within themselves. So when you start to mix expansions, you notice like, wow, this character's 1,000 times stronger than this one. Or maybe this set's stronger than this one. So I think as you mix stuff, as you pick up more things, it feels less and less. Definitely balanced. I wouldn't say it's less fun because it's still a fun game. Basically, you get a deck of cards, you draw cards, play them, move your character around and fight it out on a board. It's up to 4 players, which is a massive bonus. Obviously, it's a little quicker being a board game. There's only a small board and so many actions you can take. It's not overly complicated or tactical. There are definitely tactics to it for sure, but it's not, you're not going to delve into this one like you would like Warhammer or something like that. There's no massive rule book. Very easy to get into, very easy to play. And if you're looking for a miniature game, but you don't want to head into this world of hobbying and all of that stuff, then maybe this is the one for you. Ton of fun, ton of characters. Give it a go. Very easy as an entry step into all of this. Now, my next 2 are both discontinued. They're both on the edge of being miniature games. The first one I'm going to talk about is the Pokemon trading figure game. So this was released ages ago. It's discontinued. There's a ton of drawbacks now if you want to get into it. It's very expensive. It's hard to find. The game is very luck reliant. You're literally spinning a disc to see what happens. Thought I'd put it on this list anyway. I would still recommend you to pick it up. It's Pokemon. I've obviously love Pokemon. It's a really fun game. There's a lot of charm to it. You move your characters around, you spin the things to see what attacks you do, who wins. The figures look gorgeous. Honestly, I've loved collecting them. Let's move on. There's no point in me selling this one to you because you're probably not going to be able to find it anyway, and if you do, it's going to be more than you should spend on it. And I would say exactly all of that stuff again for this one. Yu-Gi-Oh! Dungeon Dice, or Dice Masters. Yu-Gi-Oh! Something. The pictures and video here will show you what it is. Basically, you move stuff around. There was a Yu-Gi-Oh! Episode where they played this game, and I was like, oh, I do prefer board games and tabletop miniature stuff to the card thing, so that could be really interesting. And it's a fun game. Again, not overly tactical. Again, very expensive now because it's discontinued. Very hard to pick up, quite luck reliant. But again, I don't even really love Yu-Gi-Oh! I love the old series as a kid, but not sure what to say on that one. I've not bought a ton of it, so it's fun. There's some very unique stuff. I think if I made my own miniature game, I would maybe implement some of this stuff. It's very interesting, very unique, not something I've seen before. Basically, you roll symbols. As you get those symbols, you add them up, which lets you summon certain monsters. So I think potentially I do want to try and build my own board game or miniature game. So maybe that's something I do in the future on this channel. And maybe we look at that game as one of the inspirations for that. So next up was Doomed, which was my first agnostic game, which basically means you can use miniatures from anything. It's got a rule set. You bend that rule set to however you want to play the game. It's a ton of fun. I love the theme to everything. I love the rules and the how you build your armies. There's not a massive amount of options, but it's enough to get you going, and there's enough different options to play a ton of different games. I will say the game scenarios are absolutely incredible. The fact that you have to build your own creatures for them and build your own monsters and terrain. This game is perfect, but I think it's only perfect if you're like a veteran. So if you're into the hobby side, you're into building these big creatures, kit bashing stuff, then this game is going to absolutely unravel you. However, if you're just getting into the hobby, I can't recommend this game. You can obviously use stuff from other games, but if you're just getting into the hobby, you've probably not got those other games. You've not got the expertise to kit bash stuff, which I would say I don't have either. I very much just use things as proxies, which is fine. I have those because I've played so many games. But definitely one you should have in your catalog at some point, as agnostic games just give you options to use all of those miniatures maybe you don't get to use enough of. Now, obviously, it was going to be somewhere on this list. Next up is Warhammer 40k. Now, I picked up a Deathwatch army it was when Leviathan came out. By the time I got to a game, my rules, or there had been updated rules for my codex, I think that's what it's called, or my army anyway. But my stuff was already out of date. There was already newer stuff. I don't know, it's infuriating. It's so expensive because it's constantly updated. I have to put negative. I know it's like the most popular miniature game, but they were two massive negatives. The other one was the first game I played, I had stuff wiped out before I even got to use them. It's one team activates, does absolutely everything, then you get to do your stuff. So there were points where I would lose like a unit before I could even do anything. There was no reaction. There was no option to do anything in retaliation. I know there are some things with stratagems and other things that you can add in to give you like Overwatch and other things, but yeah, there's very little you can do. It just feels like things are out of your hands a lot of the time. And I don't know how it's so popular, honestly. I do, because the miniatures are gorgeous. The world is built in, is incredible. I watch so many lore videos on Warhammer, despite I don't even play the game anymore. I played a ton of games of it. It was enough for me. I was pretty much fed up with it at that point. But yeah, the world is built in. The characters, the miniatures. Even though I don't like the one team entirely activates than the other, I do like the rule set and the amount of options and customizability in Warhammer. I very much see why it is the most popular game. But I think because I wasn't into it when I was younger, I don't have that nostalgia, that love for it. All of that has gone towards Middle-earth and other games. So yeah, it's a good game. There's a lot of drawbacks, a lot of positives. It depends what you want from a game, in which camp you're going to lie. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Let's move into 7TV, the next game I got into, and one that I bought. I was going to say, you could probably see a rule book over here somewhere. It's pretty dark, actually. You can't. Absolutely loved it. It's basically you playing like a 80s TV movie. Your army is your cast, so you can have absolutely anything. There's a ton of random stuff like Scooby-Doo, RoboCop, all those 80 horror movies. There's Stranger Things more recently. There's the young ones. Honestly, anything you can think of, they're going to have a range for you to represent them in game. If not, you can find them from other things. Like you could take your Blood Bowl miniatures and have them as like a sports team. There's just so much you can do in this game. It's very much leaning into that fun side, that silly side, these random moments, impacting your game and creating the most memorable moments in tabletop. And I think for me, that's what it's all about. And this does that in abundance. It's not overly competitive. You need to be wanting to tell a story and have fun if you're going to play this. If you're the type of player that just wants to kill an army and go all out war, this is not the game for you. This is very much building a story, building a scenario and having fun, having these silly moments as your opponent's star is swinging away with the MacGuffin, which is pretty much anything. It could be, in this case, I think it was a golden idol. He's swinging away with it to get out. Suddenly someone shoots him, he falls. Somebody whips him and he's restrained, and then he's set on fire, and suddenly everything has gone wrong. But you don't care because it is just fun. It's a good time and it creates a perfect story, a perfect film, a perfect TV, whatever you're trying to create in this scenario. And this rule set is, oh, it's just so good for that. I do want to do some of that on this channel. So like I said, I've got the rule set, I've got a ton of miniatures ready to do it, so I will be doing that. I might actually use the Dad's Army stuff I mentioned before. So one I got into more recently, and probably second in terms of favorite rule sets, is Moonstone. It's very unique, so the way you do things is like no other game I've played. There's a lot of bluffing involved, so it's taking things that you wouldn't expect to find in a miniature game and implementing them. The miniatures are the best, my favorite of any game I've played. Like, I will flash up some of the stuff I've been painting. I still need to finish the painting because playing with grey plastic miniatures really irks me. So once I've finished painting that, I've got a ton of terrain coming from J-Mac's armies of... I don't actually know what the final part of his name is. It keeps changing it. But if you're into Middle-earth, you probably know who J-Mac is. He's doing me a ton of terrain. So we'll be doing a ton of Moonstone stuff at some point. It's fun, it's fresh. The bigger miniatures means you can really focus on those paint jobs. It's a bright game, a unique theme. It feels very silly. It's very Monty Python. It's nearly the perfect game for me. It's one that I've got a lot to say about. I will be doing that in some separate videos coming up. Make sure you're subscribed if you want to see those. But let's finish this up with a couple more. So next up is Battle Companies. Now, technically, is just Middle-earth again, but I wanted to talk briefly on Mordheim and that type of game in this section. So I have picked up the rule set for Mordheim. I've started building an army behind me. I've got a vampire and some dregs and some other stuff. I'm very excited to get into Mordheim, especially to do a video on it because the community looks incredible. There's a ton of amazing stuff already here on YouTube. I'm very excited to delve into that. But I didn't realize Middle-earth itself had a rule set very similar, where you can create this campaign, you can have this team, and as you play through each scenario, it impacts them. So maybe one loses an arm, maybe one has a scar, which makes him more powerful and more deadly, or maybe more feared in those upcoming battles. You fight against orc camps, you fight against trolls. The scenarios are very different. It's very unique. It's very story driven, which is my favorite type of gaming. My favorite game of all time is Dungeons and Dragons, and that is for that storytelling. You get these battles, but also you get that story which evolves the battles as you go. And things like Mordheim, things like Battle Companies are as close as you can get whilst still being a miniature game and having that extra rules, those making the battles feel more impactful and just creating such a fun experience with friends. I have put this separate because the rule set is almost entirely different to Middle-earth. It doesn't work the same. The scenarios aren't the same. Doesn't really help you learn the rules too much. And like I say, I do want to move more into Mordheim, so you can count this as like a Battle Companies Mordheim hybrid. But I didn't want to put Mordheim on here because I've not actually played a game of it yet. Despite reading the rules, despite building an army, despite preparing to, like I say, I will be bringing that to the channel at some point. Next up is maybe the most recent game I've got, which is a miniature game, and that is Halo Flashpoint. You've probably seen on the channel, I've already talked about it briefly. I was a massive Halo fan growing up. The game is fun, it's very fast, it's quick to build teams. The flip side of that is it doesn't feel like there's too much to the terrain building. I think it's fine. Terrain building, team building, although the terrain again is just cardboard. So I think the miniatures are fine, the terrain is fine, the team building is fine, which isn't an issue. Being just okay in some areas is fine because the actual gameplay itself is a ton of fun. If you roll 8s, they are crits or explode, and you can roll more dice. And that can just chain. You can pick up snipers, you can pick up rocket launchers, the gravity hammer, you can run in and smash your opponent. You can include Master Chief or fight the elites. There's just so much to love in this game outside of some of the areas where it's not as good as some other games. But it's in Halo, it's in that video game world, so if you enjoyed that, you're probably going to enjoy this. So yeah, that will be coming at some point. But the last one I want to talk about is one of my favorites. It is the Street Fighter miniature game. Now, this again is very much more adjacent to board games, but I think in terms of a board game, it's definitely the best rule set for a miniature game. And it's better than some fully fledged miniature games, honestly. When you make an attack, your opponent also gets to make a defense. They can maybe reverse the attack, or they can maybe defend some of the damage, or they can try and dodge out the way, or maybe they don't have that option and you can just play attack after attack and combo them. There's a ton of stuff that happens in this game as reactions. You're never not doing anything. Like I say, you can defend, you can try and react, you can try and counter, you can try and run away and pick up an item and throw it at them, you can try and punch them through a wall, or there's so much in this game. It is absolutely incredible. When I mentioned making my own miniature game, this would be the main focus because its rule set is near perfect. I think in a miniature game, the most important thing is feeling like you can always do something. And like I mentioned, some of those games lose that. But this game absolutely nails it on the head. So if you've not tried it, go check out the Street Fighter miniature game. If you've got any miniature games you think I might like, drop them in the comments below. I might do this again with some more miniature games. Probably would have to be next year because I'm going to have to play some more. But that's all I've got for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, I do have a Patreon if you want to go over there and win some goodies. So whenever I play a miniature game, my patrons are assigned characters. Depending on how the characters perform, you win some goodies. So from whatever game you enjoy, I will buy you something nice as a thank you for supporting me. Once you've won that, whoever has the most points, their points are reset, and then other people get a chance. So yeah, you can do that. If not, a like and subscribe goes a massive way. I really do appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next one.